Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You guys are good? All right, great.
Let me say good morning to everyone. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council, Chair of the Committee of the Whole, and with me is Councilmember Charles Allen, Councilmember from Ward 6 and Chair of the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety. He's not here because of that committee, but as a council member, he introduced legislation that I co-introduced and several other members co-introduced earlier, I don't know if it was this year or last year, called Metro for DC Amendment Act of 2022. It got some publicity back in late September, early October, when it went through the Committee on Transportation and Environment, because what it proposed was that we would start a program that would have a fiscal impact of maybe $150 million a year, if I remember correctly, that would provide a subsidy to residents of the District of Columbia, essentially all residents of the District of Columbia, of about $100 a month to be able to ride public transit, whether we're talking about Metro bus or Metro rail. I would say that's pretty exciting and newsworthy that there's this ability for DC residents to be able to ride bus or rail free. That's basically what a $100 a month subsidy would cover. The bill was sequentially referred, so it was came to the Committee of the Whole, which I chair, and we've been working on the bill. And the reason we're having the press conference today is I'm filing Councilmember Allen and I are filing legislation today on an emergency basis that will help provide some funding for this bill. But the bill actually goes much farther than what we had talked about before, in fact, much farther than what I just described. So these are the basic components of the bill. And our intent is that this legislation will not be adopted subject to appropriation, but rather will be funded, beginning with service next July. That bus service in the District of Columbia, on all bus routes will be free. That there are 12 routes, bus routes in the city that are major bus routes that are not overnight, and with this legislation will have overnight service. So for example, workers in service industries that require them to get to work late at night or come back from work early in the morning, who currently don't have access to bus service, that they will have access to bus service. The legislation will also fund what we're calling a service reliability fund, which is to provide upgrades as needed for bus service in the District of Columbia. There still will be a piece, which will be this subsidy of, I'd mentioned before, of $100 a month. That, I can't remember if we keep that figure in the bill, but that would be for Metro Rail. That would not be implemented next summer, but it is a fourth part of this bill. The important thing, in my view, is that we are providing free bus service, Metro bus service in the District of Columbia, and that we will have overnight service on these major routes. And if you think about it, with free bus service, we will see faster bus service. And why do I say that? Because right now, if a bus pulls up to a bus stop and there are a number of people who have to get on, each one has to go through the fare box or past the fare box, and that slows things down. This will be faster. And because the buses will be faster, it means that they will be adhering closer to what their schedules are. So they're win-wins all around. We will be the first major city in the United States that will have free bus service, public transit. I think we're going to see that other cities are going to see what we're doing and recognize the advantages of this, and that we will be a forerunner in the vanguard with regard to this change. Councilmember Allen, I don't want to speak for him, but he did speak briefly with the mayor yesterday, and the mayor has a long record of supporting trying to reduce fares for buses or to have free bus service, and so we expect that this legislation will be very favorably received and move forward, as I said, this month. On Tuesday, there are two bills. One is the Metro for DC as amended, and then the second bill will be the funding mechanism, so that this will be able to take place beginning in July of next year. That's our intent. I'm just wondering if there's anything I left out. I'm going to turn to my colleague, Councilmember Allen, and then we'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is an incredibly exciting day. I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, your partnership and your leadership here. When I introduced Metro for DC about 3 years ago, it was based on the idea that we can both make public transit more affordable and dramatically improve service. It also was about a week before the pandemic shut basically everything down. So back then, it was a little bit hard to imagine a day like today. But I think the pandemic also showed us just how important public transit, and in particular, our buses, are and have remained for people who needed to get where they were going. Ridership, as we know, on the buses compared to rail fell much less steeply and recovered more quickly. In the past year, I have really enjoyed working closely with Councilor Mary Che to move Metro for DC through her committee. And with Chairman Mendelson, he's always been a strong supporter of this concept and being able to help eventually now move this through the full committee of the whole. Today's announcement that Metro for DC will advance to a vote next Tuesday, and it will include both the subsidy for DC residents on Metro Rail, but it will also provide free buses operating in the District of Columbia. It is a game changer for our residents, and it is a game changer for the future of our city. And by advancing the emergency legislation to dedicate our excess revenue, we can potentially start to see this benefit next summer. We're talking about excess revenue. We're putting it right back into the pockets of our residents and of our businesses. Free transit, though, of course, is only as good as the frequency and the reliability of that service. And that's why an integral part of this legislation from the beginning is having the type of service and bus improvement fund associated with that. And that's why that piece of this legislation is so critically important. It's an investment in better service, and it ensures that WMATA will have what it needs to help earn riders back. This is, I think, that rare idea where almost everyone is a fan. It's a major advancement that can happen fast. It's something that people can get behind. Our residents, our riders are excited about this because they see what it's going to impact on their commutes and their cost of living and their day-to-day. Our business community is excited about this because they see what it means for their workers and for their customers. And for the many organizations and groups that are working to help make DC easier to live in, no matter what your income is, we're excited about the transformational change this can create. We know that a quarter of riders in DC earn less than $10,000. Nearly 70% earn less than $50,000. Making our DC buses free will benefit DC residents, and about 84% of all bus riders in the district are DC residents. This is going to be a massive improvement in their day-to-day. Making the bus fare free for all of DC is a transformational change that we can lead on. We will be the first major city to be able to make this happen with a focus on equity and economic recovery. And I know in crafting the bill, I've heard a lot of support from our business community, in particular our restaurants, our nightlife industry, adding in the additional routes they're going to run overnight. It is incredibly important for the workers and the workforce of those venues. It's also incredibly important for the customers and patrons of those spaces. It's part of DC being a 24-hour city, and it's going to be crucial to our recovery. Overnight free bus service is a lifeline for all of those workers, as we've talked about. I want to thank Mr. Chairman, as well as the team with the Budget Office, who have done incredible work on this as well. The folks at WMATA, as everyone came together to help figure out what truly was possible. And that, of course, includes our fantastic WMATA board member, Tracy Lowe, and appreciate you being here. But I'm excited about this, and I think everybody across the district is going to be excited about it. This is a big day where the District of Columbia is leading the charge and making sure that we see what is possible with our public transit and what free buses and an investment in public transit really can be for our city. And I'm incredibly excited to be here today and look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you, Councilmember. So let me see if there are questions. Yes, sir. Well, with regard to the bus service, there'll be no smart card. For the Metro Rail, which will not be funded as of next July, so that has a longer ramp up date, it would be through a smart card. And the reason for the slower implementation of that is to work out details. We'll probably have to make some adjustments as we work with WMATA on that. So, but the immediate is the free bus service. And it's a little hard to believe, but when the bus pulls up, you'll just get on it.
Yep.
How much does that cost the city, though?
It's going to cost, I believe it's going to cost in fiscal year '24 about $43 million. Now, that's both the free bus service as well as the overnight, the extended bus service, the two together. So, well, for 24 hours each day. Forever. Mm-hmm.
This isn't a pilot program. This is what we're doing.
Yeah, let me just be clear here. This is permanent legislation, and what this bill does is, the two bills together with the funding mechanism, is to provide free bus service in the district, not free bus service for a month or for a season or for a year, but to provide free bus service.
Chairman Mendelson, the $100 transit subsidy would have done the same thing. Can you explain?
No, it would not have done the same thing. It would not have done the same thing for a couple of reasons. One, the access, even though every DC resident would have access to a fare card or a smart card or whatever the mechanism is, that's a barrier. I don't want to say it's a huge barrier, but it's a barrier. You'd have to apply, you'd have to get it. Second, it's possible, conceivable, that you might go over that $100 a month. What we're doing with the bus service, there's no barrier at all. The bus pulls up, you get on it, you get off. It's that simple.
Why the change was being made, though? It excludes Metro Rail, obviously.
It excludes Metro Rail.
Right.
That becomes much more complicated. The reason the change was made was that as we worked on this legislation that, as I mentioned at the beginning, Councilmember Allen had authored, as we worked on it, and we were looking at two issues. One was what the cost would be, which was estimated, if I remember correctly, around $150 million. which I'm holding my breath because it's hard to say we could fund that. And we also, the second issue was with the technology, how to make, it goes back to your question, sir. How does that technology work to minimize fraud and different issues? And we realized that we could, for roughly $40 million, provide free bus service and the advantages of that. Councilmember Allen mentioned the equity piece. Both of us mentioned that this really is leadership in the country, that the service will be quicker because you won't be waiting to get on the bus, or you're on the bus waiting for everybody to get on. And that means that the schedules will be adhered to better. This is better in so many ways, and it's also, because it's free, going to induce ridership. We're going to see growth in public transit use, and that's a good thing as well.
Let me add a little to that if I can.
Yeah.
Just to add a couple of quick things to that as well. The goal of Metro for DC from the beginning has been to try to create a fare free system. That is a very difficult thing to do with WMATA. Structurally, from the district, Virginia, Maryland, and federal side, but also structurally when you think about the actual act of riding. When you're on a bus, you tap once when you get on, not when you get off. When you're on rail, you tap once when you enter, and you tap again when you end. So we are able to achieve our fundamental goal more quickly, which is let's get to a fare-free bus right away. That helps us also structurally because, again, that's only eliminating the one tap. We can't do that yet, and it kind of speaks to what Chairman Mendelson talking about. It's going to take us a little bit of time to figure out what and how we make that subsidy work for the rail side of this. But we have an opportunity in front of us to dramatically transform the way that our riders are using transit in the District of Columbia by making our bus free immediately.
Is this a progressive thing? Could rail be included down the road, or you can build up, something like that?
I think that's part of why the legislation is phased, so that we build in the time to work with stakeholders, work with MATA to be able to achieve that. If it ends up that the right path is that type of subsidy model, then we can work toward that. If we can continue working with partners to think about moving in the direction of more fare free, but we are setting ourselves on the path to seeing real, tangible, meaningful impacts for DC residents and businesses very quickly on the bus, and then continuing that momentum to build on rail.
One last question.
Well, there are obviously a lot of, thank you, sorry about that, a lot of benefits, clearly, when people can get on, and that was seen, it was done during the pandemic when it was free, and you did see ridership increase at Metro. Is there any concern, there have been studies done in other places that have done it, that there is an increase in cost, there's an increase in maintenance, you might have to run more buses, maybe there's more buses on the street, and then security is also an issue. Were those things sort of thought about as you went along here? Obviously, there's a lot of benefits, but those are sort of the things that have come up when other cities have done it in the past.
Well, the conversations we've had with WMATA's general manager are that if there's ridership increase within the existing capacity of WMATA, that our cost doesn't go up. Now, if we see such a significant increase in bus use that suddenly they have to run 3 times the number of buses, then we probably would have to increase the cost for this. On the other hand, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
We want to see more folks in buses. I hate driving next to a bus lane and there's no bus in it. I want to see it full of buses.
Ask is if it's confusing for some riders, because isn't Metro cracking down on fare jumpers on the rail side, where now on the bus side, just come on in for free?
I don't think that's confusing. So you pay for rail, you pay for rail. And on the bus side, actually, we don't have to worry about fare jumping.
I mean, they're cracking down on people not paying on the rail side, and you're saying, come on the buses for free. So
Well, I think that's a good thing.
There's no
Maybe
fare.
there'll be more people riding the buses and fewer on the rail. Don't take me too seriously on that. But I don't see any complication there. Do you?
No, I don't.
What about the red
there'd be no-
buses?
Don't you dare jump the fares, but hop on the bus.
That's because there's no fare on the bus.
What
to
about
jump,
the
so it's- I don't think
DDOT
it's
buses?
confusing at all. Sorry, Stan, go ahead.
What about the DDOT buses?
This legislation doesn't speak to that.
So you just still have to pay to get on those?
Yeah, I believe they're $1 right now. But I don't want to.
Because the mayor,
I don't wanna
wanted
jump
those
ahead
to
on
be
this,
free
but-
too, and y'all wouldn't let her. So I'm just curious.
Correct. There have been other issues with that in the past. But we'll be getting a budget from the mayor end of March. We'll see what comes out of that.
But it doesn't seem kind of strange that Metro's free and the city-owned buses aren't?
No?
Well, it does to me.
Okay.
Yeah, it does to me too. I'm just going to piggyback on that. The council opposed Mayor Bowser making the circulator bus free, but now you want to make WMATA free, and I don't understand. Are you now open to making the circulator buses free?
I think that's quite possible, but that's not what's before us today.
I get that
wanna
it's
be
not
clear
before
about
us
that.
today, but
That's-
I think a lot of people are
that's
going to be asking
possible.
this, and it's going to lead to confusion. Some buses are free and some buses aren't. And when the mayor tried to make the circulator buses free, the council opposed that. So, and now you say you're possibly open to that. So I'm just, can you square that circle for us?
I can square it, but I'm wondering whether I should let you go. I'll go first. Yeah, I can square it. Remember, the mayor proposed that during the pandemic. Remember, she proposed it when WMATA had a cost to it. Remember that she proposed that when the council was struggling to try to fund necessary programs in the midst of revenue shortfalls. We're in a different place right now, so yeah, I can square it that way. And if we want to discuss the circulator, we can do that when we have the budget next year. And I'm certainly not standing here saying that that would be off the table. But this is, and in fact, both of us touched on this. Making bus service free to anybody in the District of Columbia not only will be a forerunner for everybody in the country, every major city in the country, but it may be a forerunner with regard to other programs, like Metro Rail, that question, although I don't see that happening right away, or with Circulator.
So so then, to just some logistics here. This is any bus ride that originates in the District of Columbia, regardless if you terminate in Virginia or Maryland, correct?
Yeah, the buses that terminate, that go across the border like 1 or 2 stops.
Right.
So like the Friendship Heights bus, the 30 buses, this would cover them. The Georgia Avenue buses, which I believe go to Silver Spring, this would cover them. It would not cover the stops to fairs in Maryland.
Correct, I
But as soon as
understand
that
that.
bus is in the district, the fare box is covered.
And there was some issue when you were discussing originally the $100 stipend for residents, that people who got federal or government or work subsidies for public transportation wouldn't be able to get those. That obviously wouldn't be an issue on the buses, right?
That's not an issue on the buses.
Right, okay. And then back to the $100 subsidy, Chairman, you expressed a little angst about how to if there's going to be money to fund that. And so how does that get funded? I know you were talking about excess revenue. And then when do you anticipate that you're saying that that's further down the line? Is there a timeline on when?
I think we have 2025 in the bill. Does that sound right?
2024, 2025, yeah.
I'm sorry, did you come to an agreement there?
No, we didn't come to agreement.
So,
But it's not in 2023.
FY 2025, so the fall of 2024.
Fall of 2024.
okay.
That's what we're looking at. There are wrinkles to be ironed out.
And then have you discussed with Metro, like just, have you negotiated just a flat fee with Metro that you come to this $46 million figure, whatever?
Yes, those discussions, the microphone was taken away from you. Have we discussed this with Metro? Yes, there have been discussions.
Is that how it's going to be? You come to an agreement with Metro on a flat fee to cover this?
Yes.
It's not going to be based on any kind of,
Yeah, there is I'm hearing from our board representative, there will be an inflation factor in here.
But can I have one
But,
more?
yeah,
The reason why, I think, if I can try to get to the heart of your question there, Mark. So whether that bus is 50% full or 100% full, the costs aren't any different. So we're able to work with WMATA to essentially have, this is what our flat costs are to be able to run those buses at that service level. So I talked about earlier, we do expect that because you are cutting down on the time of someone to have to board it and tap that card, you're going to see an increase in efficiency and speed of those bus service. So that is part of the experience we've seen that will take place here. So you'll see a more frequent bus going. But as we also said, if we see something that does dramatically increase the demand for the number of buses, then that might have to have us go back to revise that agreement with WMATA. But it would be a flat fee, to your point, around operating those services. Now, we also know the cost of everything is always going up. So the cost that we're doing as part of that emergency legislation on the financing also includes inflation adjustment, just so that as we build in the costs over time, there will be that inflationary index like we would responsibly do for any other type of way we index something over time.
Does that $43 million, I apologize, does that $43 million include the $10 million that was budgeted in the original bill to improve bus service routes?
So the 42 is the making buses in DC free. It includes the new overnight lines, the dozen or so plus that will run overnight. Then there's the 10 million service and equity fund on top of that. So that is not inclusive. That 10 million is not inclusive in the 42.
But that 10 million goes to something other than the overnight routes.
That goes to focusing on improving bus service in the city, especially in corridors that have long been underinvested in, to improve service, reliability, the quality of your ride. You know, think about where bus shelters are, right? You can probably figure out, if you take a look at a map of the city, where there are shelters and where there aren't. So making sure that we are investing in the quality and experience for riders on the bus.
I've gotten this before, but why make this available for the entire district? Not instead of low income and only middle income families? Why include everyone?
Well, my answer on that is public transit's a public good. I am not going to means test your sidewalk. I don't means test your road or your libraries or your school. If you believe public transit is a public good, it is a public good. And that is going to be something that is crucial. It also costs an incredible amount of money to go create a means testing system to be able to figure out ridership. And then as we talked about with the numbers of who are our Metro riders, when 70% are earning less than $50,000 a year, we don't need to go do a lot of complicated math to know that we can make a dramatic improvement for low and middle income DC residents by making this change right away.
And you had mentioned...
So I would just add, to make it means tested, we have to go back to having a fare card. Because the fare card would be how you do the means test. So one person who's low income would get a subsidized fare card, and the next person who's not low income wouldn't. And the fare card complicates this, complicates it in a number of ways. For one thing, we've got the fare jumping. For another thing, we have to protect against fraud, people who are selling the fare cards, and there's just a cost of administration with the fare card. All that's avoided with this. And as Councilmember Allen said, overwhelmingly, we see that lower income folks use Metro Bus. So we are targeting them with this free bus. And doing so with a cheaper cost. So I think the bus component, more than the rail side, is the equity in promoting public transit.
And on the rail side, I believe, Councilman Allen, you had mentioned that that's not going to take place as of June or July. What's taking place right now to make it happen as quickly as possible, and what are the hang-ups right now with Metro?
I don't want to describe them as hang-ups. I want to describe them as there's obviously the mechanics of figuring out how to make that work. To be able to create the monthly subsidy on a transit card, we then have to create essentially administrative process to that. So the administrability of a program like that takes time, takes resources, takes people. And so the administrability of just saying buses are free is much simpler to be able to make that change. To be able to put in the type of subsidy on a card is just going to take a little bit more time for us to be able to think through how do you administer that, how do you staff that, how do you resource that. And that's why we don't want to delay what can take place now that will be absolutely transformative for DC. And then that's why it's built into this legislation to continue the work, to then think through how we make that other piece of it work so that we're looking at the entire system.
I'm going to toss out one other piece to the answer on that. In addition to just the administratability and working that out, I think we're going to see changes in ridership patterns with public transit, with this free bus. It may be that there are fewer folks who use rail because it's cheap and easy to use bus. We may see a whole lot more people get into the public transit system on bus, but maybe on rail as well because they make the connections. I think we're going to see ridership changes. And so to know exactly what we need to do for subsidized rail, to know that now, when we think there'll be changes beginning in July as a result of the free bus service, it's better to take the time, see how this plays out, and then based on that, we make refinements to the rail side subsidy.
So one more question. I understand there will be analysis that's needed, but do you have an estimate as to when the subsidy part will be figured out for the rail?
So the legislation has it as the aim is for the beginning of FY '25, which would be October 1st, 2024. Yes.
Tourists, everybody,
Anybody who rides.
we want folks to ride the bus.
Anytime you make fare service changes, transit agencies have to do Title VI equity analysis, which basically looks at how a change would affect different populations. And obviously, this is a win for DC residents, but WMATA is a regional body. Have you talked with WMATA about how this change could kind of go through that process? And, you know, that's kind of sucks for Silver Spring residents, you know, but have you talked to Metro about how
Well, you know,
the
that Silver
implementation?
Spring resident could just walk a few blocks and get on the bus in the district and it's free. So I'm not
They
too
could
worried
move into
about
the
them.
district.
Yeah, they could move
They
into
can
the
move into the district as well.
You move into the district, yeah.
Love to have it. Yeah.
No, we've not. I think there was a brief, very brief reference to that equity analysis. That is, I don't believe is the district's challenge here, but
Right.
regardless, I don't see any way to splice and dice what we're doing and see anything but an equity benefit.
And then Metro General Manager Randy Clark the other day was talking about this at a panel, kind of, you know, regional cooperation and stuff. And he said, you know, basically he doesn't want to see certain agencies do, you know, all-door boarding and some don't, some changing fare structures. But he said, if we're looking at low-income fare programs, we should be looking at the same thing. If we're looking at kids ride-free programs, we should be looking at the same thing regionally. How do you address kind of that difference? I mean, do you think the region should be working together? Or do you think the district should be kind of going on its own here?
I think the district is providing the appropriate role of being a leader in saying, this is what we are going to do with bus, and this is how we are going to make this better and more equitable, improve service. I think that will also, I mean, I know from sitting in my seats on the Transportation Planning Board at the Council of Governments, a number of other elected leaders from around the region are very much excited about what we're doing and keeping a close eye on it. And I think there is a regional interest in being able to help move in this direction. We don't need to wait on that. And I think we can be a leader in that space to really make sure we are showing it can happen. And as we do this, as I think the chairman also alluded to, as we see our ridership in bus increase, it is also going to create an increase in riders coming to rail. That is also good for our entire regional system as well.
So with hopes of
I would
more
add
people
this.
adopting this?
Yes, I would add this. The bus routes in the district, there are a couple, maybe more than literally two, that do stop in or have a terminus in Maryland, but they're really district buses. Every bus we're talking about is a district bus route. So when you think about Metro Rail, it is interjurisdictional. You get the red line in Shady Grove and you go through the district, but that's not true with buses. So it is easier to make that distinction in terms of bus service. Are there any other questions?
Yeah,
James.
2 questions.
Yeah.
As a bus rider, I know that the buses tend to be a haven for the homeless. And with free service, you'll have people getting on the bus and never getting off. Have you talked to the executive in terms of what you're going to do in terms of that and also in terms of safety?
No, I've not had that conversation, but I actually think that problem might diminish. And right now, because we've seen so much fare jumping, I'm not sure that those homeless individuals are paying now, the ones you're referring to. So if it's free, I don't see what the change is. But actually, it might diminish because what I've learned over the years is that if you attract more riders, if you attract more people, that tends to kind of discourage folks who just want to be isolated and sort of, sleep on the back seat if the back seat's kind of taken up with riders. So there may actually be less of that.
Question has to do with major routes. Will it be the city or WMATA that defines a major route?
Do it in partnership.
We're doing it in partnership. Thank you for that prompting. But we actually, I have a sense of what the 12 are. Because, we've asked, I think we have in the legislation some criteria, but basically we're just using the criteria that WMATA is using to identify the 12 routes. And they include the Georgia Avenue line, they include the X2, the V2, which I believe is Minnesota Avenue, the 30 line. I'm not going to give all 12. It looks to me like that's the 80 bus route. So it's going to, they're routes that everybody knows.
And they're routes that run through every ward in our city. They're routes that cover across the board, and they are routes that are our highest ridership. So when you think about who is that individual who may be going out for a late night evening to the person who's coming home after a long shift. These are routes that are going to be geared towards making sure there's a really strong focus in equity for both the workers as well as for the benefit that it can potentially have for our business community as well.
Other questions?
Hit them first. Mine's off topic.
Let's go to Sam.
I just want to know, are the current routes you're just extending overnight? Is that basically what you're talking about? So they're not new routes, they're just
Correct.
current routes, but they're going to be 24 hours.
Yeah, but that's a big deal.
Well, I understand that, but I'm just trying to make
well,
sure
no,
you're
we're
not
not
creating new ones.
We're not creating new bus routes.
Right,
with this
so it's just the
legislation.
current ones, and they'll just be 24 hours.
But the $10 million could be used possibly to create new routes if we need to. Mark?
Councilmember Allen, could I ask you an off-topic question?
Sure.
Can you update us on the confirmation vote for OUC Director Holmes?
Yes, there will be a vote next Tuesday, and I will be recommending disapproval. I will be recommending disapproval.
Your colleagues to see what you think. Do you think that you have the votes to stop her nomination, or what's your guesstimate there?
Yes, I have talked with my colleagues, and that gives me the confidence to move forward with a vote on next Tuesday, where I'll be making a recommendation of disapproval.
And why exactly would you recommend your colleagues disapprove her nomination?
I think that over the course of the last year, from performance of the agency and to addressing the auditor's findings, to the feedback that we've heard from the public, I think that we've got to have leadership in OUC from a different direction.
And if I could ask both of you an off-topic question. We saw the Housing Authority hearing yesterday. It looks like Mayor Bowser is going to propose emergency legislation to restructure the board for DCHA. I'm just wondering from each of you what you think about that proposal, if you would support it, your thoughts, Chairman.
You go first. All right, I'll go first. I have not seen the legislation yet, so I can't say one way or the other. I think that something significant is necessary, though. I think that we are talking about an agency that is in deep trouble, that isn't able to deliver. It can't deliver for the people who rely on the housing. So I can't speak to do I support or not support, because I haven't actually seen what the legislation is. So I'm open to it, though. But I do believe that something significant is going to have to be necessary to try to figure out how we right this ship, because Ward 6 has more public housing units than any other ward in our city. When I talk to my public housing leaders, they don't have confidence in DCHA. The units are in complete disrepair. I've walked through buildings that don't even have front doors, that it is not a shortage of money that we have tried to direct from the council. Just a couple of years ago, when you and I worked with Events DC to take surplus and spend it there, never saw the benefits of that, though, because of the mismanagement at DCHA. And so I am very open to taking a look at it. I just haven't read it, so I don't know what it actually all entails. I'm open to it, but I do believe that we have got to have some type of dramatic change that takes place there.
Mendelson, have you been briefed on the legislation at all?
Yeah, I've circulated the notice this morning to put it on the agenda for next Tuesday. Essentially, it's like creating a control board on a temporary basis to take over the board side of running the housing authority. There are a couple of problems, if I can put it that way, with regard to right-sizing the housing authority. And one of them is that the board has, by all accounts, become very dysfunctional. The current board has become dysfunctional. And the Housing Authority is going through a transition. The current director has always been a temporary basis, so they're looking to hire a new director, and we need to get from here, meaning today, to there, meaning when the new director comes in place. I think it's critical that we have stability in that leadership and with the current board. And with the current board, it's tenuous at best whether we could just keep that stability to get to having a new permanent executive director. So with this legislation, there would be this control board. It's a smaller board. We will have a pretty good idea of who will be on the board when this comes up before the council next Tuesday. And it's a step toward getting this agency back to where it needs to be.
Can I just get, again, a little bit more clarity on the $100 a month provision? Is that a commitment? Is that going to happen for sure in 2025? How does that work? And so it would give everybody that provision. When does that go into place? What would it take for it to go into place?
Well, right now, what we have in the bill is that it would be fiscal year 25, which means October 1st of 24. That's right now what we have in the bill, and I believe we still have in the bill the $100, although we might be looking at that just because we're no longer talking about bus. But there, so what I think the way I look at it is what we have in the bill with regard to that subsidy for district residents for Metro Rail is like a placeholder. We have it outlined, but it's probably going to have to get reworked before it's finally implemented. And we will have 2 budget cycles. We'll have 2 budget cycles to work that out.
Because that component is not in the funding plan. For the
Correct, right now, but it is part of the bill.
It's
Yes.
part of the bill so that we keep that momentum going and work out all those details.
So as I said before, there are four parts to the bill. The free bus service, the overnight service for 12 routes, the $10 million service reliability fund, and the what I'm going to call a placeholder section for the smart card subsidy for DC residents for Metro Rail.
When does it take effect for the buses?
What we're trying to, what we're trying with this, remember there are two pieces of legislation. The emergency legislation is the funding mechanism so that it can start next July.
July 1.
Yeah, that's Metro's fiscal year is July 1st.
And this vote is Tuesday?
Yes. So the emergency would be Tuesday and the permanent would be Tuesday and the 20th. Are there other questions? On topic?
Mark always has more questions.
Absolutely not. The auditor released a report today on Department of Forensic Sciences, really looking at some of the pitfalls in the oversight committee. Chairman Allen is nodding his head in the affirmative. I know you do have some legislation that might address some of the issues that have come up. Just what are your thoughts and what do both of you say? I mean, it's just one shoe after another with DFS, and it's costing taxpayers, I don't even know how many millions of dollars, but you know, this is not the situation we envisioned when you all funded and built the Forensic Science Lab.
No, we have seen a Department of Forensic Sciences that has been in deep trouble now for the last couple of years, losing its accreditation. It is deeply damaging to the entire criminal justice system. It is to the point that it, as we have talked about in our hearings, it has put at risk and jeopardy convictions that are already taken place. It put in jeopardy cases that were pending, and it has had a dramatic impact on the ability for investigations to be able to move forward even right now. The legislation that we have moving forward dramatically alters portions of the Department of Forensic Sciences. In particular, though, strengthens the oversight so that you have the Science Advisory and Review Board be able to have the teeth that it should and need to have to be able to do more of its job as it was designed, to be able to make sure that the department is doing what it's supposed to be doing, can investigate as it needs to investigate. And we found what I think were fatal flaws in the way in which the SAB, under its current structure, was unable to do its job and unable and frankly shielded from being able to have the type of oversight that it needed over the director and the actions, the allegations that took place there. So the legislation that's moving forward is aimed at squaring much of what has been wrong at DFS, and I'd be more than happy to talk about it later offline too, about some of the details of that.
On Metro?
The DGS audit that took place last week, or that was released last week, are there any plans for another hearing regarding DGS, and any plans for reform for that agency as well?
Well, the council is going to go through a restructuring at the end of this month, and so it's too early to say that there will be a hearing. I did talk to Councilmember Robert White yesterday about, or the day before, about the auditor's report on DGS. I had been briefed earlier, so I can't say I was surprised when the report came out because I already knew. It's appalling. The DGS, Department of General Services, has spent millions of dollars for a software program called Salesforce. It's a standard software application for managing programs like work orders, and DGS isn't using it. So they have no quality control, they have no accountability, and they also have no adherence to a schedule for making repairs that are necessary. This is particularly concerning with regard to schools, and the auditor's report looked at schools, but DGS is responsible for all of the facilities of the government. So it's very, very concerning, and at least now the public knows what's wrong at DGS with regard to how it manages work orders for our school repairs, and the council should proceed with oversight, but as I say, we're going through reorganization, so can't announce today that there are hearings or when those hearings will be. But it's my intention as chair of the council to make sure that there will be some hearings, oversight hearings, early next year, what DGS is going to do to change its work processes, because those processes have got to change. Let me just kind of wind down this press conference with regard to Metro. I didn't say this very clearly at the beginning, but I want to thank a couple of people. I want to thank Councilmember Allen, because he's the one who authored the legislation, and even though he got colleagues to co-introduce it, and I was one of them, he's really been the one pushing it. So we wouldn't be here today if he hadn't done that. And I want to thank Tracy Haddon-Lowe, who's one of the District's 2 representatives on the Metro Board, because as this legislation started to move, came out of the Committee on Transportation and the Environment, she and I had conversations about how we could improve this, and that's what led to our being able to revise this legislation substantially from just being this $100 fare card that might have a few problems to being this free bus service. As both Councilmember Allen and I said earlier, this is a game changer. I think it's going to induce ridership, which is a good thing. It's going to be very good for our residents, especially from an equity perspective. And we will see, because of the ease of boarding and unboarding, we will see better service. It's good in so many different ways. Thank you all very much. If there are any other questions, I'll be here for a couple of minutes. Councilmember Allen will be here for at least an hour.
Yes, no.
No, thank you all.